Our next speaker, Dr. John McCall, is the director of Pedro Arrupe Center for Business Ethics and professor of philosophy and management for St. Joseph's University. His scholarly works include the contemporary issues in business ethics and numerous articles in the field with special focus on employee rights. His topic is titled Business Purposes and Business Reforms.
Bit of a disclaimer. The theme of this conference is utopia, making a better future. That's a fairly lofty topic, and I'm going to actually lower my sights a bit. I'm not going to talk about anything as lofty as utopia or even space, for those of you who were here earlier. I'm going to talk about something a little lower down in the hierarchy. I'm going to talk about business. Business is not now, and I don't think it ever will be, a utopia. But I think if we reconceptualize the purpose of business, and if we think about certain kinds of business reforms, we can make for a better future. So let me start with a very simple, basic question about business. What's the purpose of business? Now, if you walk the hallways of the top business schools, or you wander around the executive suites of the top corporations, you're going to receive a common answer. Business is about making money. Okay. Or as the academics put it, the purpose of business is to maximize shareholder value. Now, we've had money making as part of business since business existed, forever. But this idea that the purpose of business is to maximize shareholder value is an idea that really began to gain prominence in the mid-1970s, and it has increasing prominence today. And I think that it's a fundamentally dysfunctional idea. I think it's dysfunctional from the perspective of an organization, and I think it's dysfunctional socially. So let's just think about this from the organization perspective. What's an effective organization look like? An effective organization is an institution where the members of that institution identify with and commit to a common project. It's an organization that has a mission. The mission defines what the organization is about. Right? It sets priorities for decision making about practices and policy and how the resources of the organization are going to be allocated. The mission is core to who the organization is. Right? That's what an effective organization looks like. It has a clear, identified mission that people commit to. Now imagine what an organization looks like if the top management of that organization really does believe that the primary purpose of business is to maximize shareholder value. Think about what that means. Mission is really secondary. Just a means to achieve profit. Mission doesn't matter really. Doesn't matter whether you make widgets or bread. If you think you can make more money, with bread, you sell the widget factory and buy a bakery. You don't have any serious commitment to a particular objective or mission other than money. And think about what this means for the members of the organization, the employees. Are they likely to commit to have loyalty? Are they going to get any sense of reciprocal loyalty from the organization? I don't think so. I think this is a recipe for long-term dysfunction. But this is an idea that we've known about for millennia. There's a parallel idea that we can find in Aristotle. Aristotle talked about the hedonic paradox. The hedonic paradox is an idea that says that person who single-mindedly seeks his or her own happiness is unlikely ever to achieve happiness. And the reason for that is that happiness requires the cooperation of others. We have a parallel problem here. If the organization is single-mindedly pursuing profit and share value, then all the others whose cooperation it requires are less likely to commit. So I think we have a problem here of organizational dysfunction as a very real potential if, seriously, the top management thinks that the purpose of business is to maximize shareholder value. I also think that there's social dysfunction with this maximization rule. Causes are hard to nail down, but if we look at the dramatic and harmful consequences of the crash of 2008, we can trace some of that to the over-leveraging of corporations and to the financial engineering that was all done in pursuit of short-term, obviously, but it was all done in pursuit of shareholder value. But I don't want to concentrate on that broad picture. I want to narrow it down a little bit, and I want to talk about what kinds of social dysfunction there might be with respect to employment if corporations are run with the message, maximize shareholder value is the purpose of the corporation. There are two trends that I want us to focus on. They both started in the mid-1970s, and they have continued apace. Now, I don't want to say, and I can't prove, that these trends are causally connected to the increasing dominance of the shareholder value maximization rule that began in the mid-70s as well. But I do think there is a connection, and I'll try to explain how there is a connection. The two trends are these. Wage as a share of national income has been on a steady decline since the 70s. Capital share has increased, wage share has declined. But if you look within the wage share of the national income, you see something else. What you see is that income within the wage share has been more and more unequally distributed. Those at the top of the income scale are getting a greater share. Those in the middle and those in the bottom are getting a lower share of the national income. I think this is dysfunctional. I think a society that experiences this level of inequality is unlikely to remain a healthy society for very long, if in fact our society is healthy, even at the moment. So I think we can see that the shareholder value maximization rule is not necessarily a good thing for the organization itself or for society at large. So what can we do? What are things that we could think about? And there are two ways that I want to try to answer that question. One is small bore, by suggesting specific reforms of particular business practices. The other is bigger picture, by suggesting that we reconceptualize the purpose of the corporation. And both of these things, I think, are essential. Go small bore, and go again to think about employees. There are two practices or policies that I would recommend that we think about adopting. One is to extend employees conditional job security. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying absolute job security. I'm not saying that people who are doing a bad job at their job should keep their job. They should be fired. But I am saying conditional job security. You should be able to keep your job and be fired only for cause. So I think one of the reforms is that we should extend conditional job security to employees. I think the other reform that we should think about is giving employees a greater voice in decision-making at the corporate level. Give employees a voice in what happens at their workplace. If we do those two things, I think we can marginally, not perhaps dramatically, I think that we can marginally shift the balance of authority within a corporation, and we could then marginally perhaps impact how the gains or the benefits of the organization are distributed among the stakeholders, so that you might, if not correct, at least flatten out the decline of wage as a share of national income. There are a lot of people, however, who are concerned about these two recommendations that I'm making about job security and employee voice. The critics say that if you give people greater job security, you're going to damage productivity, because if your job is secure, why bust your butt? Why work hard? And people will say that if you give employees a voice in decision-making at the corporation, employees will underinvest in the future of that corporation. They will want to take the assets of the corporation and use them for their own private purposes now. I think both of these things are unlikely. I don't think either of these criticisms is true as a description of the consequences of job security or employee voice. Okay. Think about job security and productivity for a second. Okay. If you go to the research by scholars in strategic human resources, you find that those scholars identify characteristics of high-performing workplaces. They share characteristics, these high-performing workplaces. And interestingly, two of the characteristics they share are conditional job security and employee voice. These are the high-performing workplaces. Why would you commit to your job if you expected your job to be taken away immediately? Right? So high-performing workplaces do have these characteristics. But, and this is surprising to many people when I mention this, but another aspect of job security and productivity. Think about some of the nations of Western Europe. In some of the nations of Western Europe, output per hour worked, that is productivity, output per hour worked over time has equaled or surpassed that in the United States. We're more productive in the sense that we work more hours, but output per hour worked, you can find places in Europe that are as good or better than us. And yet these places have legislated employment security and employee voice. So I don't think you can say with much evidence that job security necessarily causes a decline in productivity. Nor do I think that employee voice causes underinvestment. In fact, I think employees will have a longer-term view of the corporation's welfare than perhaps current management does. Current management is pressed by the market to show quarterly increases in share value. And that has been established to generate less investment in the long term or the future. That's one of the main criticisms of American business, is that they take too short a time frame. Right? So I don't think that employee voice necessarily causes the harm suggested by the critics, that it would lead to underinvestment in the future. So I think both of these things are important and that we should do them, and that they will help maybe achieve a better future for people, help reduce perhaps the increasing inequality that we see, the hollowing out of the middle class. But I don't think that's enough. I think we need to take a broader picture and to reconceptualize the purpose of the corporation. Not say that the purpose of the corporation is to maximize share value for investors, but to take a different view. To say that the purpose of the corporation is to allow people with a very clear mission to produce goods and services that people need, to promote the common good, and to do so in a way that is cooperative, where everybody can share in a common project, and where everybody participating has the ability to exercise their human potential, and where everybody gets a fair share of the assets or the benefits of the enterprise. That's a different view of the corporation. It would require different models of what expectations investors have, what practices management follow. But it's a different view, but not one that should be foreign in this auditorium. It's not one that should be foreign at a place like St. Peter's, because this view of the corporation, and in fact, this view of the corporation's purpose as promoting the common good, this understanding that employees should have conditional job security, this understanding that employees should have voice in decisions at the corporation, are in fact main themes of 125 years of modern Catholic social thought. I think we should reclaim that tradition. I think we should re-envision what the corporation is all about, and we should make sure that the corporation operates in a way that benefits all its stakeholders and not just focus on management maximizing share value. Management's job should be to worry about the welfare of all the stakeholders of the firm, not just maximizing share value. I think if we reconceptualize the purpose of the corporation in this way, if we revise business education to emphasize business for the common good rather than business for investor maximization, if we give employees greater security, give them a voice in decision making, We're not going to achieve a utopia by any means, but I think we can make for a better world. Thank you. And we